Hello and welcome to the deep dive spoiler-filled discussion of the Australian 2007 movie Rogue. Now, the one point I want to discuss right up front is I really thought the dog was going to survive. When I first started watching the movie and I saw, oh, there's a dog. Well, there's no way that he's going to make it. And my friends thought the same thing. It's like, alligator food. I have one friend in particular who's very sensitive about that kind of thing. And I think there's a website called Does the Dog Die? And he would be a good candidate for checking that out. Me personally, it's fantasy. It's a movie. Clearly, they're not throwing a dog into an alligator's mouth. I'm good. But I really thought after a while that the dog was going to survive. And I think especially once we got to the point of the discussion about whether or not to use him as bait, and they found a way out of that in the dialogue, I really thought, okay, this dog's going to survive, and that's going to be cool. That's going to go against the grain of this. I was prepared in that opening stinger that I do in these my review videos. I was going to be walking back and forth up here, the dog lived, the dog lived. The dog didn't live. What are you going to do? Sometimes stereotypes exist for a reason, and you got to shoehorn those into your movie. So Greg McLean, I am of mixed opinion on him, and I think the settings that he chooses are wonderful. I love what he puts in front of the camera is gorgeous, and it's clear that, I have no doubt, I haven't looked it up, but I have no doubt he's Australian. I think it stands to reason. Either that or he just loves Australia. I have a feeling it's both. And I'm honestly glad to see horror movies come from all corners of the earth. So when I hear about, French horror films and Italian horror films and African horror films and then Australian horror films, the more I hear, the better I feel about, it's like, that's fantastic. We all share this trait of wanting to be scared and loving the medium of film, and combining the two, I think, is a wonderful thing. And then being able to represent the country that you love and the landscapes that you adore, I think, is also wonderful. So combining all of that, aces all around. But again, as much as I loved Wolf Creek, and I thought that Rogue was campy fun, I have to admit, I just wasn't terribly good. And The Darkness, I thought, was an okay but ultimately fairly flawed movie, and that didn't even take place in Australia, as I recall. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was set in the U.S. So, Greg McLean, I'm going to continue watching your stuff, and I'm going to try to nail down some manner of opinion on how I feel about your films. Right now, it's a little bit all over the board, but keep it up, because I am curious, and I want to see more. And then lastly, I want to kind of cover a much more broad topic, and that is the world of creature features. The problem that I have with them is, as much as I love them, and as much as I will sit down and watch them any day of the week, I have to be totally honest with myself and admit they typically aren't very good. And by typically, I mean by far the majority of the time. 98, 99% of the time, they are not good movies. Fun, yes. Enjoyable, absolutely. Great to laugh at and make, and put lines in characters' mouths and throw popcorn at the screen. 100%. But quality films, when you elevate to go from the M word to the F word, to go from movies to films, not typically. And then also not terribly scary usually. I'm trying to think of one that is both a creature feature and truly terrifying. The only one I can really think of is Jaws. Lake Placid to some degree. As far as horror goes, it really is its own special, unique category. And it honestly makes me glad that I did revise my scoring system prior to rating Rogue, because I have a feeling it probably would have fallen down a lot harder if it had been butted up against the fear quotient category and had marks down for that. But one of the things I really like about creature features is, in order to have a movie that audiences can identify with, typically you have to have a protagonist, and the protagonist has to match the audience as closely as possible. There's a reason that we don't have big monster movies where the big monster is front and center, the main character. We usually have humans that are our eyes and our ears. It's the focal connect point for the audience, that now we are in their shoes and now we can see the big monsters. Oftentimes the camera angle even is from 6 feet off the ground, not 600 feet off the ground, 6 feet off the ground and looking up. And the reason for that is because we need that level of connection. So oftentimes where the movies will either succeed or falter is in those human storylines. You can have big CG monsters and, prior to CG, big, guys in rubber suits with scale models, and still have a fun movie. But whether or not you're going to have a good movie typically depends on the humans and their storyline that's happening behind it. Jaws was exceptional in this. The character development, the writing, the pain, everything about this, about Jaws worked. And in my opinion, the best scene in that entire movie, you ask people what their best, their most favorite scene in Jaws was, and they'll talk about Quint dying or the first kill with the girl swimming nude at the beginning. For me, it was that intimate moment between Sheriff Brody and his son after Sheriff Brody gets slapped by the boy's mother. And he's despondent and drinking and sitting at the dinner table, and his son is mimicking his movements, and they're doing that completely silent interaction between the two. I thought was such a special moment. Well, that's one of the things that I think sets Jaws apart, and that's my point, is with creature features, you need that human element, and you need to pay really strong attention to it. It's so easy to get lost in the big monsters and forget about the humans. Lake Placid, I thought, did also a good job with this. I really thought that the Oliver Platt character, as much of a joke as he was, and jerk also, I thought that he was very enjoyable. And Bill Pullman, I am going to adore any day of the week, and I will never apologize for that. I love you, Bill. Another one is Shin Godzilla, and this kind of also falls into an odd place because it was less about individual humans as it was about the notion of human response to a kaiju, big monster destroying the city, and the levels of bureaucracy and discussions and scientific acquisitions and meetings and even down to the fine-grained paperwork handling that has to go into something like that. And that was more what it explored than even the monster destroying the city and Godzilla destroying the city. And I thought that was, it maybe wasn't the same level of emotional connection as, say, Jaws, but I thought it was still extraordinarily fascinating and put Shin Godzilla at, one of the top Godzilla movies for me because of that. So, it's just more of, it's not a criticism of Rogue. It's not even, an exploration. It's more of just taking the notion of big monster movies, big animal movies, and just a conversation piece more than anything else. And being a conversation, what I'd like to do at this point is to hear from you. If you have anything you'd like to add, if you agree with me or disagree with me on my review of Rogue, whatever, I would love to hear your opinions in the comments below. I will be reading them. I will be responding to them. If you like these videos, these reviews, these deep dive discussions, I would like to welcome you to click subscribe. Other than that, I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I really do mean it, for making me a part of your day. It means a lot, and I really hope to see you tomorrow.